all persons must be treated equally under the law. And the courts upheld, or the courts overturned that law.
And it was because they were claiming personhood, or because they were saying they were treated different than other corporations that were local corporations?
It's the same thing. I mean, like, in other words, because they're persons, then they invoke the 14th Amendment prohibition again, or the requirement of equal protection of persons under the law. Remember that's, again, corporate personhood is part of the linchpin that has then allowed them to do these other things. And this might be helpful. Yes, ma'am.
You may have covered this, and I'm sorry that I missed it, but what's the difference between, in terms of how the law applies to a PAC and a corporation? I thought we were talking about that we were looking at a lot of, in terms of the free speech argument, in terms of PACs representing groups of people with an opinion.
Right. Well,
so how does this apply to them, or does it?
Well, it could, depending on how it would actually be written. But a political action committee is not incorporated in the same way. It could. It certainly could. I mean, and again, this is the point. Like, I guess the difference is when you say what we're talking about, you are now, don't confuse the legislative process from the constitutional amendment. Remember that the Constitution limits what government can or cannot do. So when we're calling for a constitutional amendment to make it clear that corporations don't have constitutional rights, another way to think about it is it would actually clear the way for state legislatures to be able to do many things that you once did, but now no longer can do because courts have foreclosed that, claiming that your action are violating the constitutional rights of these corporations. Yes, sir.
Did I understand you or hear you correctly when you said that one of the points of your platform would be to ensure that money is not treated as speech, is not protected as speech? Okay.
Correct. Yes, sir.
So there really are two pillars here. At least one is the corporate personhood and the way the courts have looked at that, and the other is this idea that money equals speech. Both of those do come into play, even in Vermont's prior law. I know that's not the primary point of the conversation here, but where we attempted as a state to limit what candidates could spend, not just in what individuals could give to those candidates, the court said very clearly in the 2006 ruling striking down Vermont's law that that can't happen, in part, again, relying on this theory that money equals speech. That's what the boiled down decision of 1976 essentially means, that money equals speech, therefore you can't limit it. Well, that would be open to us if we made clear through some sort of an amendment that money is in fact not speech. So the solutions that we might want to pursue, both in limiting contributions to candidates and indeed in what candidates can spend, could potentially be open to us, if I understand correctly.
No, you're right, and that's why.
Yeah, but just to, on the other hand, if you, I mean, this is what makes this difficult. If you did that precisely, it of course would mean that you could prohibit the expenditure of money by certain groups. So for example, we could have a law that said VPERC could not spend money to promote its cause. Anyone, because after all, that activity would not be protected speech. So, I mean, it's a very tricky business, but if I could ask you, was the 1886 decision decided correctly in your view?
No. And we can give a number of reasons, but no.
But, okay. So in your view, does the Constitution of the United States make corporations into persons?
No.
Okay. Then the root of it is not actually the Constitution, but Supreme Court decisions from 1886 until 2010. Right?
Well, I don't understand the question.
You've just said to me that the Constitution does not provide that corporations are persons, and that the decision in 1886 that said so, in fact, was wrongly decided. So it strikes me that your quarrel is not with the text of the Constitution, but with the interpretation that has been put on the Constitution by Supreme Courts, which of course do change their positions according to the justices. Is that not an argument that the problem does not lie with the Constitution, but in fact it lies with the court? And therefore, once again, I come back to the notion that wouldn't this better be decided by having true democratic accountability for the Supreme Court?
Or clarification of the Constitution, just as we clarify laws, to be sure that the intent is met in the words. Then clarifying the Constitution so that the intent is met with the words. So if you look at John Adams' consideration of business and an industry, and his concern that that business and industry and corporations would overtake individual rights, I think we see the intent within one of the framers of the Constitution. So it's clarifying that intent through an amendment.
But it would have to rely once again on a court which is pro-business to make these decisions, so they can continue to do it.
Well,
But you did, I mean, I kind of like the amendment that says women can vote, and what we knew that the problem was not the Constitution, but the men in charge, and so the alternative would have been to get rid of the men. But it's easier to change the Constitution.
It was the men who changed the Constitution.
Right, only because their wives.
But actually, as the son of one of the champions of the Equal Rights Amendment who poured her heart into that, and I will say proudly raised a feminist son, and sort of the perspective that I bring to this, and as a lawyer I look back on not only the Equal Rights Amendment struggle, but also the 19th Amendment struggle. I think it's really important to respect and understand that when the 14th Amendment was passed, that said no person shall be denied equal protection of the laws, a group of women got together and said, all these state laws that say we're not allowed to vote, that's obviously unconstitutional. And clearly, by any reading of it, it was true. And the U.S. Supreme Court in Minor versus Hepperset said, no, women are not persons for the purposes of the 14th Amendment. And so, it's interesting, it's true that there were many people debating, well, the court's just wrong, and I think it's really worth pointing out. And they didn't say either we put pressure on the federal judiciary, or we try to amend the Constitution, or we engage in grassroots organizing. And I want to resist very much, and I say this with deep respect, I'm trying to resist that either or. It is always, in my opinion, as an organizer, a both and approach. And to that end, what I'm saying is, please support us in our call for a big picture proclamation that corporations aren't persons, because that's the rally. And I'm telling you, as somebody who's gone around the country sleeping on couches for the last two-thirds of the last year, two-thirds of my life, this is a rallying cry for people who are saying, we want a different world, and we know that corporations are part of the problem, and they're responding. And if you were to pass this resolution, it would be a beacon that says, yes, and let's ask for more. And while you're doing that, sort of the big picture beacon, I will be very candid with you that said, if I were in the Vermont legislature as a result of Citizens United, yes, I would cast a vote for a non-binding resolution. I would also be crafting legislation that required absolute strict disclosure for any dime that a corporation ever spent. I'll tell you another thing that I would do, and I would encourage y'all to get with your legislative counsel. And this doesn't run afoul of anything that this odious decision, or, if I may say, other incorrect decisions that this court has made and will make. You say, all right, if corporations can spend money, and the court has said we're not allowed to touch that, then we want a vote of the shareholders. And we want to get, and you could actually say not even 50%, 75% to really make sure. But you could require in Vermont, before a dime is spent of corporate money, that the shareholders have to approve it.